Welcome to the Thread to Mend podcast. My name's Taylor, and I'm coming to you from Baltimore, Maryland. And this is a podcast about all things fiber related, mostly including knitting and spinning, sometimes other crafts in the fiber world. And it's the summer. It is now mid-August, and as a garment knitter, there's a lot of delayed gratification to knitting sweaters. In Maryland, it's a zone 7B, so it's very hot, and we get lots of sun throughout the year. So I'm finishing sweater after sweater, and I haven't worn any of them yet. But I wanted to show you the sweater that I most recently finished, which I'm really excited about, and I have a lot to say. I haven't yet sewn in all of the ends, so please forgive me. I thought I had done the most important ones, but I actually forgot the very first cast on end. This is Caitlin Hunter's Tecumseh Sweater, and it's knit with Abundant Earth Fibers Joseph and Ani, which is I believe it's a 3-ply fingering weight merino targi blend. It's mostly merino to make up the white fiber of the body, and then the heathered look to the main color, I believe, is from the addition of the colored targi fibers. So this is a 100% domestically grown and spun yarn. I believe Abundant Earth Fiber is based out of Washington State. It's possible that the sheep that grew this fiber are not far from the mill, and I just can't say enough about their yarn. This is the second sweater I've knit out of Abundant Earth Fiber. It was my Rhinebeck sweater of last year, which was the Stasis pullover, and it'll be my Rhinebeck sweater this year, I think, unless I'm able to finish knitting another sweater before mid-October, which is not at all likely. The colorwork yarns are my hand-spun yarn in the top sort of plus sign motif. If I can get a close-up of that, you'll see that it's a marled yarn, and it's a blend of fibers that's a little bit of a mystery because I received the roving in a fiber share package. And I ended up over-dyeing the fiber because I think that if my memory serves me, it was a blend of silvery gray and lime green. And although I love gray and green, it was just not the exact hue of green that I often look for. I really like a chartreusey green. And you'll see in the cuff of both the sleeve and the bottom, there's a variation, or a variegation rather, to the yarn that makes it a little stripy, but kind of muted. And I made the cuffs with this fiber because I only had 2 skeins of the main body. The pattern calls for 3 skeins, and so I just knew I needed to be really conservative with my yarn and map out an alternative plan. I really didn't buy any of this yarn with this project in mind. Like I said, I spun the yarn from fiber in a fiber share. It was just a random skein in my stash. I had no idea what I would do with. The 2 skeins of Joseph and Ani I actually won in the only thing I've ever won online. It was a photo contest of their yarn, and I might have been the only person to send like a full garment. So maybe that's why I won, but I'm just so grateful, and I'm so happy to have another Abundant Earth sweater. It's actually a dream because it's like honestly the best sweater yarn I've ever made a garment in. I could say that hands down. It just has a really good handle. It's not at all splitty, and it when it's blocked and it blooms, it just makes the nicest, softest next to skin, but not at all superwash. It's not superwash, and so it doesn't have qualities of superwash, which isn't often like the most common next to skin yarn you'll find, or fiber that you'll find. It's just, I mean, I will say that if I'm overheated in my wool garment, I do categorize it as next to skin yarn, but if I am at all overheated and I start to sweat, just like any other wool, it's gonna agitate me a little bit. But I've never felt like I couldn't wear my Abundant Earth fiber sweater next to skin at all. And then the flag yarn, this gray color, which it's not dyed, it's a natural gray. And it's funny because it has a lot of dimension to it, but compared to the heathered yarn and the variegated yarn, it looks really flat. The color looks really consistent. And so I just think that's funny because when I picked out all the yarns, I was excited that I wasn't using, all my other sweaters, for the most part, are knit with a yarn that is dyed a complete solid. And so this is my first sweater where, except for my Stasis, which is the same body sweater, this one has a variegated color to it that's marled, and it has a natural colored yarn, but it's just anyway, the whole sweater is not flat, and it kind of, because the contrast of the heathered, it looks, I don't know, it just looks like kind of different. It's noticeably different. It's yarn that I bought at it's in Frederick, Maryland, and it's not the Wool Workshop. It's the Knot House. How could I forget that? I bought this yarn from the Knot House, and the only tag on it is one that says private label, and it has the Spin Cycle Yarns wool, not wool, but sheep and knitting needles crossed logo. So I believe this yarn was spun by the same equipment as Spin Cycle Yarns, but it's not a part of their branding. It's a private label branding. That yarn was really not cheap. I paid $40 for that single skein of yarn, which is probably the most I've ever paid for a single skein. But when I saw it the first time I was there, I fell for it, and I didn't let myself buy it because I didn't know what I would want to knit with it. And then the next time I visited the store, I'm a garment knitter, so I'm always thinking what do I want to make a whole sweater with? And that was the thing that stood out the most because of my memory and never forgetting it was there. So when I saw that it was still there, I bought one skein, and I really didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it. I just wanted it to stop haunting me. And I think as soon as I brought that skein home, I started looking through my stash to find what other kind of DK weights yarns I had. Because I think that was a DK weight, if not fingering, but it's like a squishy, bouncy fingering. And I could be wrong. I think that Abundant Earth's Joseph and Ani yarn might be DK as well. I might have said it was fingering earlier, and I could be mistaken. I'm going to link to Abundant Earth's product page for the Joseph and Ani yarn below, so that if you're interested in it, you can check it out and you'll know exactly what weight of yarn it is. I didn't make a lot of modifications to the pattern, except a few, just a couple. I did gauge swatch, but I always doubt my measurements, and because I don't make a full 4-inch square gauge, because I had to be really conservative with the use of the main body yarn. I pretty much just let the collar of my knitting be my swatch, which is not the most accurate, but it was a risk I was willing to take. And I saw that in the project's photos that the neckline to the sweater was right up around the collarbone. And I know that myself, I'm a little, especially it being mostly warm here in Maryland, that I like my sweaters to have a little bit lower crew neck. Not like a wide neck sweater, but not a very, I start to feel a little choked if the sweater comes across the collarbone here. So, and I've never really modified this before in a pattern, but I thought I would take a shot at it. What I ended up doing is, you can see this is the back, there's short rows here, which I have a hard time hiding short rows and increases. I don't know if that's me or if that's universal, but I believe that the pattern asked you to knit, like, I would guess, I don't know, I'm throwing a number out there, like 20 stitches, and then wrap and turn, and then knit like 20 stitches across the center like stitch marker, and then you keep wrapping and turning until you create this like arch here. Instead of doing 20 stitches, I increased it to 30 stitches. So I made the back increases wider across the back side so that this angle of the arch would just be more, I guess, obtuse or something. I thought that might just make it a little higher in the back so that it's a little lower in the front, so that this won't hit that collarbone area. It's a little shorter because I couldn't knit the full, I think it was 7 inches or so after the bottom chart. And then my band at the bottom is not as wide as the cuffs, which I would have preferred, but I also ran out of that yarn. In retrospect, if I were to do this again, the only thing I would change is I would have added stripes to the bands with the gray color, because that would have given me maybe an extra inch across the sweater. I had a ball of yarn that was maybe this big left over from the gray, and I think I would have liked to do a few rows of green, a few rows of gray, and then a few rows of green again. And then I would have more accurately measured my remaining skein of green out so that I had across the bottom band and the arm bands an even length. And I would have repeated those stripes around the cuff bands as well. That would have been one way I could have made everything a little bit longer, so that it was more of a full-size sweater and less of a cropped sleeve, cropped length sweater. So I'm just gonna throw this on really quick and I'm gonna show you what it looks like. I was really worried when I finished knitting it, because it was very lumpy and bumpy from all the color work, that it wouldn't look well on me. But I am pleasantly surprised in the way it fits. And again, I haven't woven in the ends, and I think that I haven't quite fixed the armpit. I usually take a little bit of waist string, not waist string, but extra string, and kind of tighten up these joins a little bit. So I haven't done that yet either. So I'll stand up and see if you can observe this. So it goes well below my elbows, which I like. I think it'll be good for the fall when things start to cool down, but it's still warm in the afternoons. When I raise my arms up, it does kind of crop across the center of my belly. My navel's down here, so it does come up kind of high, but I think I would feel comfortable still wearing this alone and without a shirt underneath if I wanted to. And also, like, it's sort of like the Swancho design. The armpit is much lower than my actual armpit, which I like, but it's not as low as maybe the actual Swancho that Caitlin Hunter also designed. So this is my Tecumseh sweater. I'm so thrilled with how it came out. I do look forward to wearing it to Rhinebeck in October, should we go. And I'm knitting another Rhinebeck sweater. This one is for my husband, Brian. I started knitting this sweater in early July, and I bought 5 skeins of this yarn from Green Mountain Spinnery at the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. It's their Sac de Lana yarn. It's a 2-ply fingering weight yarn that is a carded woolen prep yarn, but it's very tightly spun on the singles so that it feels more like a worsted prep yarn. Get you a little close up of that fabric. If you can't tell, it's a black yarn that is made of olive green and navy, and black. And I knit the first, so I mentioned I have 5 skeins of this yarn. I knit the first skein with, oh, I should tell you about the pattern design. I guess I'm making my own generic men's sweater design. This is the body. I have it on 32-inch needles. I use my Knitter's Pride wooden needles, and so I can't stretch it out as much as it will stretch. But you can see I have most of the body done. I'm right now working on the back, which I never, when I split to knit from the underarm to just the back, and then pick up again to knit the front, and then join the two, I never take the front needles off my cord to knit the back. I just keep it on and I turn at the end there. So you can see that I've knit several inches of the back side, but I can't hold it up for you to show you simply what it looks like. Except that I would say I'm about halfway done. The sleeves together are probably less knitting than the whole body, and I'm like right around, here. So that got a lot of attention while I was on vacation. It's so nice to have a simple stockinette sweater to just knit on mindlessly. I'm carrying this sweater project in my fringe field bag, which I waited a really long time to buy, and I'm really glad that I did. I really like the number of pockets it has. So I'll just show you what's in my knitting bag. This bag really softens up more than I thought it would, which I kind of like, and I kind of wish I had an even sturdier bag. I think it would be nice to try to execute sewing a replica that maybe has interfacing so that it is more upright. But I will definitely try to repeat the way the pockets are placed, because it gives a little extra double layer to the bottom, so the bottom holds its shape really well. In the top here, I have my clover container, and I carry in it all my darning needles of various sizes. I have one of my favorites. This is great for worsted weight or DK weight yarn. And it has the bent tip. This is the Clover brand. And this actually comes in, I think, the blue container of these, which my dog chewed. But yellow is my preferred color anyway, so. And then I have these two, which came in that container, and they're much smaller. This one's great for fingering weight, and like DK weight, it's more similar to this one, but the tip is less blunt. I don't know if that's important for you to see, but I'll give you a little close up. And then you can see the smaller needle is much more delicate, and that was perfect for me weaving in the ends of my Jamieson and Smith sweater, like a really light and lofty fingering weight yarn. Having this little needle, I think, was very useful, because it can be just a little overkill to have a needle as big as this next to that. And then while I was in Maine also, I stopped at another yarn store. I forget how to pronounce the name of this yarn store, which is kind of embarrassing because it's a real word that was probably published in books throughout history, but one that I never learned about. And it's spelled Halcyon, Halcyon. Maybe I'm spelling it wrong. That's just my memory. But it's a yarn store outside of Bath, Maine, or maybe it's inside of Bath, Maine. It's along the way there. You'll find it on Route 1 or whatever that road is along the coast. And they specialize in weaving yarns sold off the cone, and it feels like kind of magical just being in a yarn store like that, because there's not many like it that I've visited. And they have a really great variety of fiber-related things. So I would check that out if you're really interested in spinning or weaving or knitting. That's a really neat store to visit. They have a lot of notions there that I think are really well kind of organized and merchandised. One of the things that I bought was this little crochet hook, and I think that this is imported from Japan, if I'm not mistaken, and it's just a couple inches, and it's a little emergency crochet hook, and this came in handy. I'm so glad I bought this. I have another one that is in a project bag somewhere that I just discovered it again recently, but I forgot where it was. I kept it there. I was like, oh, I remember now why I put it there, and I don't know where it is now. But this I'm going to keep with my darning needles. It fits perfectly. And this came in handy along our trip because while I was knitting this, while I was knitting this Green Mountain Spinnery yarn, which is a 2-ply, I was often picking up only one of the plies, and I would look at my knitting. Because it's black, you don't notice mistakes as readily as you would a brighter color that reflects more light. I was noticing that several inches down the body of my sweater, I didn't pick up both plies to my yarn, and I split the yarn. So all I did was match up to that stitch row or column of stitches, and then tease apart that stitch, dropping the stitch, teasing it down, and then using this tool to knit back up that row of stitches or column of stitches to pick up both plies. So that happened a few times, and because I had that tool, I was able to execute that correction without any hesitation or concern. And I bought this too while we were in Maine. I bought it at a random souvenir shop that sells soap and locally crafted objects and t-shirts and stuffed animals for kids and toys, and just one of those. I mean, you'll find it along the coast of Maine in a lot of the little towns. But this hand salve smells really good. It's I'll just read to you the ingredients if they're available. Yeah, they're on here. It's made with olive and sunflower oil, beeswax, lanolin, lavender and lemon essential oil. It is very matte finish. It's not shiny or oily, even though the first ingredient listed is sunflower oil and olive oil. It's not at all liquid feeling, I think because of the beeswax, which is one of my favorite elements to a salve. I like salves and lip balms that have beeswax in them because they're heavy and they really seal in moisture. They create a barrier that holds moisture in. So I just really am pleased with this hand salve. I'm really glad I bought it. And I'm not sure who makes it. It's called Super Duty Hand Care. It says Super Duty Hand Care was designed for an old cranky Yankee who had bandaged covering his raw, chapped fingertips. After a couple of days, the bandages were no longer needed. If you suffer from hands that are chapped, chafed, cracked, and dry, this unique salve is worth a try. If we made a cranky Yankee happy, enough said. Ingredients are blah blah blah. To use, warm between palms of hands and then rub into skin. Oh, there's a price tag. Looks like I paid $8.50 for the salve, which is a really good price for a balm this large. But this is made by Sweetgrass Farm in New Hampshire. And you can visit sweetgrassonline.com, and it looks like you can buy that online, which is great. So if I run out, I'll probably buy this again. Although I've never, it's rare I run out of a salve. I kind of just keep them in rotation. So I showed you, I think in the last podcast, 2 skeins of Cormo yarn. It's actually Cormo crossed with merino yarn that I made that came out sort of Aran. And I have decided that the next amount of fiber I'm going to comb on my combs behind me is going to be the rest of that fleece. So last night when I was looking at all my fleeces and kind of reacquainting myself with my inventory, I decided I would spin this next. I have a new basket on my shelf that I'm going to use to toss this finished prepared fiber into. Oh, I pulled out the wrong bag. You know, this bag of fiber is the second quality fiber of my most recent white fleece purchase. So when I bought a Cormo, actually I can't remember if this is Cormo or Merino. I'm gonna have to pull my paperwork out. But I was very careful in preparing that fiber before I washed it, and I separated the longest staple length fiber and the best fiber from the shorter staple length fiber that's a little kind of just unorganized. Some of the fiber was very, very organized. It was still in much of the same direction. This fiber, after washing, it got a little less thorough of a washing. It was a little dirtier, but my experience is that a lot of the dirt comes out when I'm combing it. So it looks like I pulled this bag out, and I'll just show you. But I'm just teasing this apart a little bit so you can get a sense of its quality. You can see it's shorter. It looks, I can pull my measuring tool out and show you. So it appears to be about 2.5 inches without it being stretched. Actually closer to 3. Let's see if I tack it to the front and I stretch it long. It's much closer to 4 inches in staple length. So this is a decent staple. And I think because I don't need all of this fiber, I bought a full 6 pounds of fleece, and this is the second quality of this fleece. I would really like to offer some of this as a giveaway in this week's episode. And it's just going to be as is. So as I mentioned, it's a 4-inch staple length. It's definitely easier to learn spinning on fabric or fiber rather that you don't cherish, because especially when you have a high volume of it, you can just experiment and play and mess around and not have any expectation of it being perfect and coming out exactly as you want it for a particular project. Of course, if you have that ambition, go for it. But it's nice to have a volume of fiber just to learn and play with. And so I know there might be some of you out there that are probably worried about buying a whole fleece just to do that. They're not cheap. I mean, fleeces range from $40 or $50 to $140 or $50. This, I don't know. I mean, this is maybe not even half of the weight of fleece. It makes really good bedding in the winter for my feral cat houses. We do get snow here, and so I always make sure I create shelters for the feral cats that I feed daily, and I often use second quality wool that I've washed to make those beds, because it is moisture wicking. If it gets wet, it's much warmer than any other fiber that gets wet from the elements outside. So I'm going to reserve probably the worst parts of this for that purpose, and then I would like to pick apart the best parts and separate those out and just ship them off to someone, so that I'm creating more space in my area of living, and I'll know which bag I'm pulling out to spin from. So if you're interested in this giveaway, just leave a comment below. Please acknowledge in your comment that you're wanting to enter the giveaway. That way I can put you in the drawing, and I'm not confusing people who just want to leave comments below that maybe aren't interested in receiving some of this fiber. It will have some second cuts, so you'll want to look out for that, but it'll just give you practice too in finding things like that and pointing them out. So if you have any inclination at all and don't feel any expectation to make something with this, but if you have any inclination to learn spinning or learn fiber processing, I want to make that first step for you a possibility. So if you're interested in that, leave a comment below. Let me know you want to enter this giveaway, and we'll see. Maybe I'll have 1 or 2 winners. I don't know. It depends on the interest. And I'd just love to hand some of this off. So what I do plan to spin is actually in another bag behind me here. It is in this pillowcase. I store all my fleeces washed in pillowcases. I don't add them to the pillowcase until they've been washed, because I don't want to get that residue of dirt and urine and feces and oil in the place they're going to be stored. So I always wash them and dry them thoroughly. And I store them in a sack like this because it's breathable and our air in our house is relatively dry. I'm just going to check the time really quick. Okay, great. So this fleece is a dark fleece I bought at the 2017 New York State Sheep and Wool Festival. I believe I washed this fleece with Dawn dish detergent, so I got it squeaky clean, but it was pretty clean enough that I don't know, I might have stripped more oils off of it than others, and that might be why it's a little staticky when I spin. I'm just going to pull out a lock here. Take a look at it with you. So you can see that some of the ends are a little bit tippy. Tippy means that like you could kind of pull some of the ends off. I think that this might be an area that is maybe from the side body. So my memory is that not a lot of this fleece is tippy like this, just some of it. It's pretty consistent throughout the color. There's not a lot of kind of bleaching from the sun, although you do see a color change halfway through. So I am going to comb this to give it a little more even. And it's very soft. Now, I probably won't ever wash a fleece with Dawn dish detergent again. I really do prefer to wash fleece with a surfactant-free shampoo, like the quality shampoo I use on my own hair without surfactants. But this this fiber rather, it has a nice long staple length. It's a minimum of 4 inches. Let's see. It's probably, this whole piece of wood is about 5 inches and it's stretched beyond the edges. So it's a nice long staple. It's rather clean. All the dark fleeces I've ever bought, you'll notice the little bits of dander and whatnot that will fall out when I comb it a little. You notice them a lot more. But this is the fiber I plan to prepare next and comb that on my combs. And then once I get a big basket of that combed out, I'll start spinning it on my wheel. And I'm going to try to spin this darker fiber a little lighter so that maybe I'm able to make a small garment out of this. I haven't weighed this amount of fiber. I don't know how much yarn I'll get out of this stack. I would guess it's a couple pounds. So it's possible that if I don't have a huge amount of waste, which so far this fleece has shown me there's not a lot of waste. It was heavily skirted around the sides of the fleece before it was bought. And I think I paid a lot more money per pound, but I only received really first quality fiber in this fleece. So it's possible I have enough in this bag to make a sweater. I don't know because I haven't knit a full-size sweater. I did knit a full-size sweater from a Cordell fleece that I processed the year before, but I was practicing spinning on that fleece for the first time, and I made many skeins of yarn that were very bulky and dense. And so, I mean, I should have enough fiber to spin and then knit a sweater from this, but I'm just not sure if it all will be spun evenly to have several skeins of the same weight. That's really kind of a big project, but it's the next project I plan to really take on. So that's my plans for spinning and my plans for knitting. And I think that's really all I have to share this week. So I used the random number generator to calculate a winner for the last podcast giveaway of a handmade knitting project bag and 4 skeins of naturally dyed yarn. And the winner was number 5, Heather T. Heather T asked if I had any resources on natural dyeing that I would recommend. And my biggest recommendation is just going to your public library and checking out every book they have on the subject of natural dyeing and just looking through every one of those resources from cover to cover and, deciding for yourself which ones offer the information you're most interested in. I do own a book on natural dyeing. I believe it's called The Natural Dyer, or maybe The Natural Dyer's Resource. It's been a while since I've pulled it off my shelf because I'm not hugely into books. I really love the tactile learning. So I just kind of hear about things that create dye, and I find them in my environment, and then I process them as I've observed other people do or mention, or I try different mordants as an experiment. But any of those books are going to give you some information to work off of to just kind of gather knowledge and find what's available to you to experiment with natural dyeing. There is a book called, I don't know the name of it, but the subject is dyeing with lichen. And lichen is, it's found growing off of the branches of trees and off of rocks, and it's actually like it's really interesting. It's not a fungus, and it's not a algae or a mold. It doesn't exist without both the fungus and the algae together. It's a really cool sort of like symbiotic relationship, which you'll often find fallen to the ground of the forest floor after like a windy storm. It'll just fall from the trees like fruit, and you can gather it off the ground without negatively impacting the environment much if you're conservative with your gathering. And there are different ways to process lichen for dyeing than I think other materials, and I'm interested in learning more about that. So if you know anything about dyeing with lichen, feel free to comment below and add your thoughts. I want to congratulate you, Heather, on winning that giveaway. Please reach out to me with your mailing address, and I will send that off to you very soon. So congratulations on winning that prize. Again, I have a fiber giveaway this week, so remember to comment below if you're interested in winning that also. I'll look forward to seeing you. Take care. Bye-bye.